You pray, fast, read the Bible, truly seek God, and the battle continues. Not only does it continue, it seems to get heavier. And at some point, in the silence of your room, a question begins to whisper inside you: is God really listening to me? If you've ever felt this way, I want you to know that you're not alone, and that what you're about to discover in this video could completely change how you see everything you're experiencing right now. There's a part of following God that almost no one talks about openly. It's not the part about victories celebrated in church, nor the part about testimonies that draw applause. It's the silent, lonely, and exhausting part, the part where you remain strong on the outside, but inside you're starting to give way. It's the anxiety that doesn't go away with morning prayer. It's the silence of God that weighs more than any negative response. It's the feeling that everyone around you is moving forward while you seem to be stuck in the same old battle. This hurts, and I'm not going to pretend it doesn't hurt. But before you conclude that your faith is weak, that God is distant, or that something is wrong with you, stay with me until the end. Because there is something happening behind the scenes of your struggle that your eyes cannot yet see. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about now. And before I continue, I need to pause for a second to speak to you heart to heart. If you've made it this far, it wasn't by chance. Maybe you clicked on this video because the title touched on something you haven't yet been able to put into words. Maybe because you're carrying a battle that's lasted too long and is starting to weigh on you in a different way. Whatever the reason, I'm honestly grateful you're here. And that's why I'm asking you something simple now. Scroll down to the comments and write a word, a phrase, whatever is in your heart. It could be the name of the battle you're facing. It could just be a "I'm here." It could be a prayer. What you'll find in the comments isn't just a section of text, it's a community of real people, going through real struggles, who have chosen not to give up. And your comment might be exactly what someone needed to read today. If this content makes sense to you, enjoy the video now. This simple gesture tells the algorithm that this message needs to reach more people, and there's someone out there, perhaps at the limit of their strength, who needs to hear exactly what we're talking about here. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, Jesus Beyond Words, this is the moment. Click the subscribe button and activate the bell. Because here, week after week, the goal is this: to go beyond the obvious, to speak about what many feel but few name, and to find God within the most difficult circumstances of real life. Your presence here is what makes this channel grow and reach more and more people with this type of content. Now that that's said, let's continue. Because what comes next is the heart of this video. There's a hidden truth that nobody tells you about long-lasting spiritual battles. And it begins with a question most people are ashamed to ask aloud: what's wrong with me? Because that's what the mind starts to build when the struggle drags on. You look around and it seems like everyone is experiencing transformation, reaping answers, celebrating turning points, and you're still there, in the same place, facing the same weight, fighting the same old battle. And a mindset begins to form inside, almost without you realizing it, that a long battle means weak faith, that if you prayed more, believed more, lived better, the answer would have already arrived. But what if that logic is completely wrong? Think about it. David was anointed king of Israel while still young, and spent years fleeing Saul through the mountains, sleeping in caves, being hunted like a criminal. He wasn't failing, he was being formed. Joseph received a dream from God in his adolescence and ended up in an Egyptian prison years later, forgotten, wronged, invisible. He wasn't being abandoned, he was being positioned. Job was described as an upright man, and yet he lost everything: health, family, possessions, without an immediate explanation, without a comforting verse appearing at the right time. He wasn't being punished, he was in the middle of a journey that his eyes couldn't yet fully comprehend. Anxiety that doesn't go away with prayer, God's silence that weighs more than any negative answer, the exhaustion of fighting without seeing visible impact. This is not evidence that you are failing. It is evidence that you are in a process. And processes have behind-the-scenes aspects that we rarely get to see from the inside. The real turning point begins when you change the question. Instead of asking, "Why hasn't this ended yet?" then you start to consider something different. What if this battle isn't lasting because I'm failing, but because God hasn't yet finished what He started within it? This change in perspective doesn't eliminate the pain, but it completely changes what you do with it. If this makes sense to you, leave a comment below. I'm in the process, and follow me. Something that modern culture hates to admit: that not all suffering is a mistake, that not all pain is wasted, that some of the greatest transformations a human being can experience don't happen despite difficult battles, they happen within of them. God doesn't waste pain. This is one of the hardest revelations to absorb, especially when you're in the middle of the process and all you can feel is the weight of what hasn't changed yet. But there's a huge difference between a battle that has no purpose and a battle that hasn't finished what it came to do. Consider the analogy of gold being purified by fire. The raw metal enters the heat not to be destroyed, but so that everything that is not gold is separated. Fire is not the enemy of gold, it is what reveals the true value that has always been there. And the metal does not leave the fire before it is ready, no matter how intense, long, or hot it may seem. The process has a duration that is not defined by the metal's haste, but by the goldsmith's wisdom. Paul wrote something in Romans 5 that seems almost illogical at first glance, that we should glory in tribulations, not because pain is good in itself, but because it produces perseverance, and perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. This is not a poetic sequence, it is an accurate description of how the spiritual journey truly works from the inside. James says something similar right at the beginning of his letter, that the testing of faith produces patience, and that patience needs to work until the end so that you may be complete, lacking nothing. This changes everything, because it means that the battle you're fighting may not be an obstacle in your path, it may be the path itself. And here comes the part that few dare to consider. Some battles remain because they are still destroying something inside you that needs to be destroyed. The pride you didn't even know you carried. The self-sufficiency that prevented you from truly depending on God. The hidden fears that controlled your decisions without you realizing it. These things don't go away with a quick prayer. They come out in the process, in the friction, in the continuous resistance that forms what no shortcut could ever create. Victory isn't always the point. Sometimes the point is who you become while waiting for it. If this resonates with you, leave a comment below. God is shaping me, because what comes next will show exactly what happens behind the scenes while you still can't see the result. Oh, because what comes next will further deepen this revelation. Silence is perhaps the hardest part to endure. Not the battle itself, but the feeling that you are fighting this battle alone, with no return, no sign, no clear word from God about what is happening. And it is precisely in this silence that the mindset begins to build the most dangerous narrative of all, that God has gone away. But what if silence isn't absence? What if it's language? There's a scene in John 11 that always strikes me. Lazarus was sick. His sisters send word to Jesus, their friend, their teacher, the one who had the power to heal. And the text says something disturbing. Jesus received the message, and he stayed where he was for 2 more days. That he didn't go immediately. He waited, and Lazarus died. From a human perspective, that silence seemed like abandonment. It seemed like indifference. It seemed like the end. But behind that silence, God was preparing something that a common healing could never reveal, a resurrection. The miracle was greater. Because he off waiting, not despite it. This is the hidden truth that changes the impact of everything. God was not absent during Lazarus' silence. He was present, and he is present in your silence as well. Because while you can't see anything happening, there's a formative journey unfolding in layers your eyes can't yet reach. God may be developing in you a discernment that only comes after you've made mistakes, trusted the wrong people, made impulsive decisions, and learned, through practice, not theory, to recognize traps before falling into them. This kind of wisdom doesn't come from a religious service. It comes from the process. You may be developing a spiritual strength that only exists under resistance. Just as a muscle doesn't grow without load, the faith that sustains you isn't formed in times of prosperity. It forms right here, in this moment when you are still standing, even without understanding why. It may be moving you from a Sunday faith to an everyday faith, one that doesn't depend on the environment, the music, the emotion of the moment, but that breathes even when everything is dry. And it may be planting within you a compassion that one day will be the most powerful instrument you have ever used, because those who have truly experienced pain know how to speak to those who are truly in pain. God is not late, he is being precise. And when you start to see the process from this angle, something changes in how you interpret waiting. Comment below, I trust in God's timing, because there's still a layer to this revelation that needs to be uncovered. There's a lie that exhaustion tells very well. It doesn't arrive shouting, it arrives whispering, slowly, in the moments when you're most tired. And it goes like this: God has forgotten you. And the problem isn't that this lie is convincing. The problem is that it arrives at a moment when you don't have the energy to challenge it. When the rejection still hurts. When the loneliness still weighs heavily. When you've prayed so many times for the same thing that words have begun to seem empty. It's in these moments that the narrative of abandonment finds the most fertile ground. But let me tell you something as clearly as I can. Delay is not the same as forgetting. Silence is not the same as absence. And waiting is not the same as abandonment. There is a huge difference between waiting aimlessly and waiting within God's process. The first is torture. You keep looking at the clock, comparing your journey to others, questioning every decision that brought you here. The second is transformation. You begin to realize that each day spent waiting is building something that the result alone could never build. Isaiah 40 verse 31 says that those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. But what strikes me about this verse is not the promise of renewal, it's what precedes it. Wait. In Hebrew, the word used there carries the idea of intertwining, of being so connected to something that you and it become inseparable. It is not a passive waiting of someone who has given up on acting. It is the active waiting of someone who has decided to remain intertwined with God even when they do not understand what He is doing. And that changes the question you ask during the process. Instead of "why hasn't this ended yet?" you start asking, "what else do I need to learn here?" This is not a question of resignation, it's a question of maturity. It's the mindset of someone who understands that God doesn't waste any season of life, not even the most painful ones. It may be that the battle you want to end today is exactly what will prepare you to face what comes tomorrow. It may be that the rejection you are experiencing now is guiding you to a place where you will be genuinely welcomed. It may be that the loneliness you feel is creating within you a depth that constant companionship would never allow. Your exhaustion is real. Your pain is valid. And none of these feelings invalidate your faith. On the contrary, the fact that you are still here, still searching, still wanting to understand, already says a lot about who you are. Comment below, "I have not been forgotten," because there's still one final truth that needs to be told before this video ends. If you've made it this far, I want you to stop for a moment and acknowledge something: you didn't give up. At some point in this video, you could have closed the screen, gone back to endless scrolling, left it for later. But you stayed. And that's no small thing, because sometimes staying is the hardest act of faith there is. So let me recap with you what we've come through together so far, because sometimes we need to look back to understand the magnitude of the terrain we've traversed. You discovered that prolonged struggle is not evidence of weak faith, it's evidence of a process that is not yet finished. You understood that God does not waste pain, that each layer of suffering has a formative function that goes far beyond what the eyes can see now. And you saw that God's silence is not abandonment, it's the language of someone working behind the scenes in a way that only makes complete sense when the process comes to an end. This journey you're on has an impact that goes beyond you. The mindset being formed within you now, the decisions you're learning to make with more discernment, the strength being built through resistance, all of this will overflow. It will reach people. It will open doors you can't yet see on the horizon. It will give you an authority to speak that only comes to those who have been through the fire and come out the other side. And the statement I want to leave you with today is simple, but it's true in every word: you have not been forgotten. You are not being punished. You are not behind in life. You are being prepared. And everything that God began in you, He has the faithfulness and power to complete, not in the easiest way, but in the most precise way. The battle you're fighting today won't last forever, but what it's building inside you, that will. Keep this with you. Repeat it on days when the weight returns. Write it down on paper if you need to, because truths like this need to be accessible in moments when emotion tries to rewrite everything that reason has already understood. You are not alone in this fight. You never have been. Comment below, "I was made for this," because there's one last thing I need to tell you before we wrap up. Before you close this video, I want to tell you one last thing, not as a channel, not as content, but as a genuine conversation. You made it to the end. That means this message was for you. And if it resonated with you, if at any point you felt that phrase was exactly what you needed to hear today, then it fulfilled its purpose even before you clicked on it. If you identified with everything that was said here, comment now, "This message was for me." It's that simple. Because when you comment, you're not just interacting with a video, you're telling someone else on the other side of the screen that this journey is shared. And that matters more than it seems. If this content made a difference to you today, leave a like before you go. Not because the algorithm needs it, but because this gesture says that this type of conversation is worth continuing. And I want to continue having these conversations with you. If you're not already subscribed to the channel Jesus Beyond Words, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Here, the commitment is always this: to speak what is real, to delve deep into what matters, and to find God within the circumstances that life presents, without filters, without superficiality, without easy answers for true pain. And there's a video over here that perfectly complements what we discussed today. Click and continue with me there, because this journey still has much more to reveal.